All right, so I am going to demonstrate how to create some distressed type using a combination of Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. It's not just going to be distressed type, it's a type that will feel, I guess, pretty inky and kind of blobby. And so if you look at a lot of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like hipster badge design and a lot of the trends that are happening today, um, they're taking existing typefaces, sort of classic typefaces, and then running them through a series of filters to make them look a little more proprietary to the brand that they're creating and look less like they're just straight out of the box, just a kind of a default typeface. So here's some type that I just kind of threw together pretty quickly that we'll use as our starting point. This is all just using the Trade Gothic type family. So something that just feels kind of, like classic American typeface. Yeah, so let's take this, and this is already converted into outlines. So I'm going to just copy this from Illustrator and then hop over into Photoshop. I'm going to paste this into a new document in Photoshop. I'm working at a moderately high resolution. So this is a 6" by 6" artboard built at 300 dpi. And so you can go ahead and actually just flatten this all down. We're going to be running some filters on this, and if your type is on its own transparent layer, the filters aren't going to work very well. The filters need the interaction between the black and the white background. Those two things need to be flattened together for the filters to really have an effect. All right, so just something to point out, this is a grayscale file. Again, some of the filters here, if you're working in something like CMYK, for instance, one, it's unnecessary. We're going to be applying all over color in Illustrator later. So you can just work in black and white. It's a smaller, faster file if you're working in grayscale. But the other thing is some of the filters in the filter gallery don't work in CMYK mode. They'll only work in RGB or grayscale. So just something to pay attention to, make sure you're in grayscale. RGB would work just as well, but it's kind of unnecessary in this case. All right, so we've got our type dropped in here. And honestly, I don't have a super clear game plan. I'm just going to kind of apply a handful of filters that I use frequently, and we'll just kind of see where this takes us. But I think we'll get some decent results. So the first little trick that I want to show you is just blurring the type. So we can do just a global blur with something like a blur or blur more. We can also go in and maybe manually blur the type in a more uneven way and in a bit of a selective way. That'll help. We have a lot of repeating letters. We have the S's repeat, the A's are repeating. And so in a piece of customized type like this, you don't want it to suddenly look mechanical, like there's this exact repetition of letters. You want it to feel like if this was letter pressed 100 years ago, and you want it to look like there's certain ink buildup on some letters and less ink on other letters. So maybe I'll kind of hit some of these with a little more blur in some areas. And you can kind of play with this, and the more you experiment with this, you'll kind of get a better sense of what the effects are that you're working or what you're trying to attempt. Okay, so that all feels a little bit subtle at this point, but I'll kind of show you what this next step is here. So now I'm going to go to Image Adjustments and change levels. That's Command L. From this point forward, I'm just going to use the keystroke Command L. So the first thing I'm going to do is, in blurring a lot of the letter forms, what I essentially did was I created more grayscale. So whereas before it was pretty much pure black or pure white, in blurring the letters, you create grayscale all along the edges of those letter forms, so that with levels I can now adjust that grayscale. So in some of these, the first step is I'm going to make it look like the letters that I have blurred, that there's a lot more ink buildup there. So I'm going to take my left slider, which is my shadow slider, I'm going to just start moving it over to the right and just slide that over pretty far. And you'll see that some of my counter spaces are now starting to plug up, and a lot of these letters are just, their shape is just morphing just a little bit. Um, and if my counter spaces are getting too plugged up, I can start to bring the highlight slider over. So we'll do that once, and then I'm going to go back over some of these and really blur some elements quite a bit. And then do the same thing, just kind of slide this over and just start to get some of these to just feel a little bit kind of gloppy, for lack of a better word. Okay, so we're doing just a little bit of that. Now let's go to the filter gallery, and there's a couple filters here that I think tend to work pretty well. One is under the distort window under glass and using the frosted texture. Sometimes, if you overdo these textures, they can get pretty out of hand, but if you drop the distortion, keep that number fairly low, it'll just give your letters just a little bit of shakiness to them, and just kind of create some slight imperfection. So you can do that. You can even just kind of go back over the same filter by re-clicking on the filter gallery a couple times. You'll want to keep an eye on things. If you overdo it, you can always go back in history. Let's go back to the filter gallery. So now I'm going to go to the ocean ripple. That's another one. This one tends to get, again, it goes overboard pretty easily. So I usually just end up using 1 and 1 as my numbers here. So we'll hit that there. So you can already see that we're making this look a little more customized. It no longer looks quite as digital and computery. I still have some blur going on from before. I can kind of change my levels again there. Maybe some of these I want to do the opposite. So up until this point, I've been making it feel thicker and bolder. How about we can imagine that, again, if we're pretending that this was printed as a letterpress type, maybe the paper hit the lead letters a bit unevenly, or the ink was applied unevenly. So I'm going to have part of this bottom phrase be a little bit lighter and thinner. So I blurred it again, just manually. Now I'm going to slide my highlight slider over. So you can see I'm now getting this uneven effect of part of the letters are thicker and heavier, part of them are a lot thinner. It just creates that look of something that was hand printed. So there's that. Maybe I'll do it a little bit up here on the old prospector's word. Same thing. I blurred it. Now I'm going to slide this over, just creating something that is a bit uneven. We could say that's good enough. Maybe that's a good start. I'll show you another filter that I think sometimes works pretty well, which is under sketch and then torn edges. Again, you can kind of play with the image balance and the smoothness. I usually ramp the smoothness up pretty high. If it gets too low, things get very fuzzy. So I will push it to be quite smooth. And you can change the image balance. That'll make it thicker and heavier or a lot thinner. I'm being a bit arbitrary with all of this just for demonstration's sake, but you can kind of decide how you want all of that to be. So let's just say that's good enough for now. You could certainly continue to go through these same filters, these same blurs and adjustment layers, and adjusting the levels, all that. So you can do that however much you want, but if we're saying this is good enough for now, I'm now going to essentially bring this over into Illustrator. So I'm just going to title this as type demo. I'm just going to throw it on my desktop. Click save. I'm saving that as a TIFF. So this is just a grayscale TIFF. Let's hop back over into Illustrator. Go to File, Place, find my type demo here, drop that in. And then I'm going to Object, Image Trace. Let's click Make. And under window, let's pop open the image trace window here. This will give you a way of fine-tuning this. You might even click on the advanced thing. So feel free to adjust these sliders. You can tell Illustrator essentially how accurately you want them to trace what you just did in Photoshop. So feel free to play with these sliders all you want. Once you're done, once you're happy with how this looks, I'm going to click on this, go to Object, and Expand. And click OK. And yeah, and now you can see we're now in outline mode. So I can now start applying color to all this. If you want to delete all the white here, I think there's a way. Honestly, I could have changed my settings in the beginning, but a quick way to just get rid of all the white shapes. So if there's like white objects hidden in between all of your letters here, what you can do is just select the white background, go to select, same, fill color. That's now going to grab all the white objects, and then you just hit delete on those, and now you just have your clean type here. So I've now got my old old prospector's sarsaparilla type, and then apply whatever kind of color treatment you want to that, and you are good to go.